Thank you, Carol. It's incredibly kind of you, and I want to thank the Center for Common Ground and all y'all for being on here. You know, as Carol mentioned, my career after my football career was as a voting rights lawyer, and I chose to do voting rights because there was a line in a Supreme Court case that spoke to me. It said that the right to vote was preservative of all other rights. That if you could vote, you could protect yourself. You could form coalitions. You could vote for candidates of your choosing. But if you couldn't vote, then you were defenseless in our democracy. And as a Texan, as a fourth generation Texan, I knew that we had been struggling with this for some time. And while I was in law school, some of the biggest and most recent attacks on the right to vote were coming to a head. And I have to tell you, over a decade ago, when I first started voting rights, it was so much more subtle back then what they were trying to do. There was often some kind of couching of their voter suppression efforts in terms of election security or trying to improve certain things by closing certain polling places. They'd say, well, we're going to close a bunch of polling places, but we're going to have vote centers where anybody could vote. But now it's completely changed, as y'all know. And this is something that I find to be a mistake by them because now it is just so blatant and out in the open. And it is something that folks are talking about. For much of my voting rights career, I was wondering, when are people going to start talking about the attempts to fix elections, to rig elections before it even starts? I always, I know folks like us were worried about it, but I was wondering when is this going to, get through to, everyday folks that, what they're doing is trying to rig these elections before we even get there. And something about the way this has been so open and so blatant in Texas, what they've been doing has really crossed over. And it's become something that I was just in church this morning for a couple of hours. There's a black church here in Dallas where everybody's talking about it and everybody knows about it. And folks are starting to build the backlash to it. And so, I want to tell you a bit about the mid-decade gerrymandering or rigging that they've done here in Texas. They have attempted to draw five new districts from the pre-existing districts that we had, the 13 Democratic districts that we had, to take five of those away and make them into Republican districts. Not all of them will be Republican districts. They are counting on the performance that Donald Trump had in the last election, which anybody who knows much about elections knows, midterms are very different from presidential elections. And I think that in particular, some of the districts in South Texas will be very competitive. And I think we have a chance to win three of them. And there are a couple of others that they have created that are going to be much more difficult for us. And the district that I represented, the 32nd district in the Dallas area, is completely gone. It was a majority minority district. It was one that led to us having three Democrats representing the Dallas Fort Worth area. We should have at least five, but we had three. They're taking us down to two. They've also combined two districts in Houston, beginning with the 18th district, which was a historic district that Barbara Jordan represented, that Mickey Leland represented, that Sheila Jackson Lee represented, and that most recently Sylvester Turner represented until he passed away. And combining that with Al Green's 9th district, so they're taking Houston down from two African American performing districts to one, and they're folding in two districts in the Austin, San Antonio area, hurting my friends Lloyd Doggett and Greg Casar. And so this is for us in Texas. This is an incredibly emotional fight. Many of these districts, as I mentioned, are historic in nature. We fought so incredibly hard for them. I won my district by flipping it after 22 years that had been held by a Republican, and then we created it, and then we won it. We kept winning it, and they made it so that they just decided to give up on it. And it's also historic in terms of that in Texas for much of the last half century, we've been fighting to try and get representation. And so I want to thank everybody who's paid attention to this fight in Texas. I want to tell you that we do have a legal process that's playing out. There's a three-judge panel that's been convened, and I think there's a decent chance that that three-judge panel will overturn one or even more than one of these districts, because the one thing the Supreme Court has said that they will not allow is racial discrimination in gerrymandering. They've allowed, as y'all know, partisan gerrymandering, but the one thing they've left available is to say they won't allow racial gerrymandering. And if there's ever been a racial gerrymander in the history of this country, this is it. And so if they can't find it here, then quite honestly, we should just, forget about ever trying to defend ourselves in the court. And I want to be very clear about what we have to do going forward. I've talked a lot about this because I'm somebody who I have a passion for getting rid of gerrymandering. I hate it. I think it's broken the United States House of Representatives. I think it's left us as a dysfunctional body. I think it's led to all the extremists that you see on your TV and online who just want to go to Washington and throw rocks and make noise and never do anything. Much of that can be placed at the feet of gerrymandering. Not all of it, but much of it. But in this case, what we have to do, as I see it, is make sure that all around the country we don't allow them to continue to rig different states. And that if they do, then we have to respond. And ultimately, what we're going to have to do is when we have the ability to ban gerrymandering nationwide. We had legislation when I was in Congress to do that. It was called the John Lewis For the People Act. And it was required every state to have nonpartisan commissions to draw their districts. We can do that at the congressional level. We can ban it. We have to do that. To me, we have to go further than that, though, and pass the entire package of laws that was in that package. We passed it out of the House. We couldn't get it through the Senate, but it set national standards for early voting, for vote by mail, for the way your votes are counted, and as I said, mentioned, would ban gerrymandering. And to me, we're in a new era where we are no longer going to be able to rely on the courts to be the backstop for our democracy or for our rights. I'm a civil rights lawyer, as I said, by training. I want to believe that the courts, if you have the law and the facts on your side, that you can win the case. That's unfortunately not the case anymore. And so to me, we have to be in an affirmative era of expanding the right to vote through legislation. I think we should push for automatic voter registration when you turn 18 or same day voter registration. We need to push for all the things that we've talked about over the years that we said, it would be really nice if we could do that. Now it's time to actually do it. And sometimes, when you hit rock bottom, this is when the time when you have to push back off up against it. And to me, this is rock bottom. What we're seeing in Missouri, what we're seeing in Indiana, what we'll see, I think, from Florida, from many of the states where they have the ability, they will continue to try everything they can to target Black and brown districts, to take them away, and to make them into districts where they will elect a Republican. And this is a race to the bottom. It will destroy the Congress. Trust me, this is going to destroy the United States Congress. Even if you think it's bad now, it's going to get worse. And one thing that we have to understand is that in this fight, we're not dealing with anybody who has any respect for the Constitution, any respect for the ideals of our nation. And so we have to just win the fight. And when we win the fight, then we have to use the power that we have to address the underlying issues. And I feel really strongly, though, that this has now crossed over into being an issue that folks are going to vote on. My entire career, I wish that people would be fired up about voting laws and voting rights, and that they would be fired up about restrictions on the right to vote. We haven't been there, but I think we're going to be there now. And it's the job of folks like me and everybody on this call to talk about what they're doing, but also I think to say that listen, voting shouldn't be a partisan issue. Who you're going to vote for is up to you, right? We can get back to the days where it wasn't that long ago in 2005 when George W. Bush was signing the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act after it passed the Senate unanimously and overwhelmingly in the House. That is not ancient history. But I think to get through this period and to get back to that, we're going to have some big fights in terms of getting folks out to vote. And so I want to thank everyone who is a part of this. I know that this is not a partisan act. What I'm saying is that by engaging in our democracy, we can fight back to try and make sure that we pass legislation that will protect our democracy. And everything I said, from automatic voter registration to banning partisan gerrymandering to having the same laws nationwide for early voting, vote by mail, registration, everything I said is not a partisan issue. It would not benefit Democrats any more than it would benefit Republicans. And there are some arguments in some cases that in some areas it would certainly hurt us, right? But what I'm saying here is that as folks who believe in the democracy, that our conversation has to not just be about the fight now, it has to be about what's going to come afterwards and what we're going to do to make sure that we never have to have these conversations again. Because trust me, they will not stop in 2026. If they're not successful in rigging this election, they will try to rig the election in 2028. They will keep doing it for as long as they can until something stops them. And I want to be clear, I don't think that the Supreme Court will be that backstop. I think we will be. And so I've been inspired by listening to some of the folks who've been on this call already. Carol, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you. It's just incredibly important that we all have these conversations now and that we have a plan. They came in with a plan, obviously, of what they were going to do. We have to come out of this with a plan. And I appreciate you for being a part of that.